The San Diego morning fog hung thick over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Commander Marcus Kellerman adjusted his dress whites for the 100th time. 23 years of service and graduation ceremony still made his palms sweat, not from nerves, from the weight of what these moments meant. Today, 47 warriors would earn their tridents, joining the most elite fighting force on Earth. But something felt different about this ceremony, something he couldn't name. The families gathered in neat rows, their pride palpable in the crisp Pacific air. Mothers clutched tissues, fathers stood straighter than they had in years, and children fidgeted in their Sunday best. Kellerman had seen thousands of these moments, watched countless families celebrate their sons' transformation from ordinary men into something extraordinary. The ritual never lost its power. The silence before the announcement, the collective intake of breath, the explosion of emotion when names were called. But today his attention kept drifting to a woman in the third row. She sat alone, her posture military, straight despite wearing civilian clothes. Short auburn hair caught the morning light, and her weathered hands remained folded in her lap while others around her buzzed with nervous energy. There was something familiar about her bearing, the way she scanned the crowd with tactical awareness rather than parental anxiety. She didn't fidget, didn't check her phone, just waited with the patience of someone who understood the gravity of earned silence. As Kellerman took his position at the podium, his eyes found hers across the assembled crowd. What he saw there made his chest tighten, not the hopeful nervousness of a proud mother, but the steady gaze of someone who had been where her son was about to go. Someone who understood the true cost of wearing that golden trident. The ceremony began with traditional precision. Names were called, hands were shaken, tridents were pinned. But Kellerman's focus remained divided, drawn repeatedly to the woman whose presence seemed to anchor the entire event in something deeper than celebration. When they reached Petty Officer Jackson Reeves, the woman's composure cracked for just a moment, a fleeting smile that transformed her entire face before discipline reasserted itself. It wasn't until the formal proceedings ended and families rushed forward that Kellerman got his first clear look at her left shoulder. As she reached up to embrace her son, her sleeve shifted, revealing the edge of something that made the commander's blood run cold. 3 letters, faded but unmistakable, inked in the precise style he'd seen on only a handful of warriors in his entire career. His mouth went dry as recognition dawned. The posture, the bearing, the tactical awareness, it all made sense now. This wasn't just any proud mother. This was someone whose legend had been whispered through special operations communities for over 2 decades. Someone who had vanished from active duty so completely that many believed she had died. The woman in the third row wasn't here as a spectator. She was here as something far more dangerous, a ghost returning to witness her legacy. Jackson Reeves had dreamed of this moment since he was 12 years old, sitting in his mother's sparse apartment, listening to her clean her sidearm with the mechanical precision that spoke of muscle memory too deep to fade. She never talked about her service, never explained the scars that mapped her forearms like a topographical chart of violence survived, never discussed why they moved every 2 years, why she worked 3 jobs to avoid questions, why she insisted he learn to disappear into crowds despite his natural tendency to stand out. But he had learned, through careful observation and overheard phone calls, that his mother was someone people whispered about, someone whose name carried weight in circles where weight meant the difference between mission success and body bags. Elena Voss, though that hadn't always been her name, and probably wasn't her real one either. Now, feeling the weight of his new trident against his chest, Jackson scanned the crowd for the woman who had shaped him without ever explaining how or why. He found her where she always positioned herself, third row, aisle seat, perfect sightlines to all exits. Their eyes met across the chaos of celebration, and something passed between them that needed no words. She was proud, but more than that, she was terrified. Jackson had spent his entire childhood wondering what could possibly frighten a woman who slept with a loaded pistol under her pillow and startled awake at footsteps 2 floors below their apartment. Now, watching her navigate through the crowd with the fluid grace of someone for whom movement was warfare, he began to understand. She wasn't afraid of what he might face in the field. She was afraid of what he might discover about who she really was. Commander Kellerman appeared at Alina's shoulder with the sudden presence of someone accustomed to command. She turned toward him with recognition flickering in her dark eyes, not surprise, but acknowledgement of something long delayed. "Ms. Voss," Kellerman said quietly, his voice carrying beneath the surrounding noise. "Or should I say Lieutenant Commander Voss?" Alina's expression didn't change, but her son caught the minute tightening around her eyes. "Alina will be fine, Commander. That rank belongs to someone who died a long time ago." "Died?" Kellerman moved closer, lowering his voice further. "Or just went so deep undercover that coming back wasn't an option?" Jackson felt the conversation shift into dangerous territory, sensed currents of meaning beyond his understanding. His mother had taught him to read people, to catch the subtle signals that revealed when situations were about to turn violent. Everything about this exchange screamed caution. But Alina simply smiled, the same controlled expression she'd worn through his entire childhood when school administrators asked too many questions about their frequent relocations. "Some missions don't end, Commander. They just find new objectives." Kellerman glanced at Jackson, then back at Alina. "And this is your new objective." "This has always been my objective," she replied, placing a protective hand on her son's arm. "Everything else was just preparation." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Jackson couldn't decode but definitely felt. His mother's past, whatever it contained, was about to collide with his future in ways that would change everything he thought he understood about both. Commander Kellerman studied Alina with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle that could either be insignificant or catastrophic. Finally, he nodded once, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge something beyond Jackson's comprehension. "Then we should talk," Kellerman said, "all three of us." The commander's office felt smaller than it should have, despite being designed to intimidate. Jackson sat rigid in one of the leather chairs facing Kellerman's desk, hyper-aware of his mother's presence beside him. Alina had accepted the offered seat but perched on its edge, ready for movement that might never come but probably would. The weight of unspoken history pressed against the room's walls. Kellerman moved to his filing cabinet with deliberate casualness, withdrew a folder marked with classifications Jackson had never seen, and placed it unopened on the desk between them. The gesture felt ceremonial, like the opening of something that couldn't be closed again. "Operation Nightingale," Kellerman said simply. Alina's breathing changed, not stopped, but shifted into the controlled rhythm Jackson had learned meant danger was close. She didn't look at the folder, keeping her eyes fixed on Kellerman's face with the focus of someone reading an opponent's tells. "That operation was classified at levels that don't officially exist," she said quietly. "The fact that you have documentation suggests either a serious breach of security or that someone wants me found." "Both," Kellerman replied. "The breach happened 6 months ago when a former CIA analyst started selling information to foreign intelligence services. Your cover identity was compromised along with dozens of others. But the people looking for you now aren't foreign agents, they're American. Military and civilian leadership who need to understand what happened in Syria, Afghanistan, and 3 other theaters where official records show missions that never should have succeeded." Jackson felt the conversation moving beyond his ability to follow, but the tension radiating from his mother told him everything he needed to know about the stakes involved. She had been someone important, someone dangerous, and now that importance was threatening to destroy the quiet life she'd built around keeping him safe. "You want to know about the impossible missions," Alina said. "The ones where small teams accomplished what entire battalions couldn't. The operations where casualty projections called for 70% losses, but somehow everyone came home." "I want to know about the pilot," Kellerman said, opening the folder to reveal a photograph that made Jackson's breath catch. It showed his mother 20 years younger, standing beside a helicopter painted in colors that seemed designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She wore flight gear he didn't recognize, her hair pulled back beneath a helmet marked with symbols that looked more mystical than military. Call sign silence, Kellerman continued. The only pilot in Special Operations history to complete 47 extraction missions without losing a single operative. The woman who flew rescue operations into airspace that officially didn't exist, through weather that should have been impossible, using aircraft modifications that remain classified at the highest levels. Alina's composure finally cracked, just slightly. That woman retired when she realized her son needed a mother more than the military needed a ghost. Jackson stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the fierce warrior in combat gear with the woman who had spent his entire childhood working minimum-wage jobs to avoid attracting attention. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming, like discovering that the quiet librarian who raised you was actually a legendary gunslinger who'd hung up her weapons. The problem, Kellerman said gently, is that ghosts have a way of being called back from the dead when the situation becomes desperate enough. Alina stood with fluid motion, her civilian clothes unable to hide the predatory grace beneath. What situation? Kellerman closed the folder but kept his hand on top of it. 3 special operations teams have gone dark in the past month, all in areas where extraction should have been routine. We've lost contact with some of our best people, and every rescue attempt has failed. The silence stretched between them until Jackson could hear his own heartbeat. His mother remained standing, but her posture had shifted into something that belonged in the old photograph rather than a Navy base office. Where? She asked finally. Places you know, Kellerman replied. Places where only someone with your particular skills has any chance of bringing our people home. Alina walked the perimeter of the airfield like she was memorizing a battleground, which Jackson realized she probably was. The afternoon sun cast long shadows between the hangars, but she moved through them with the confidence of someone who had learned to navigate by instinct rather than sight. 20 years of civilian life had done nothing to dull whatever training had made her legendary. Tell me about the modifications, she said as they approached a helicopter that looked nothing like the military aircraft Jackson had studied in preparation for his own career. This machine seemed designed by engineers who understood that sometimes the laws of physics needed to be gently negotiated rather than strictly observed. Chief Warrant Officer Maria Santos, the base's senior maintenance officer, emerged from beneath the aircraft with grease-stained hands and the wary expression of someone who had been briefed on classified matters beyond her pay grade. Ma'am, I've never seen specifications like these. The engine modifications alone represent technology that's at least a decade ahead of anything currently deployed. Alina ran her fingers along the helicopter's hull with the familiarity of someone greeting an old friend. The aircraft's paint absorbed light in ways that made it difficult to focus on, and its rotor configuration suggested capabilities that standard aviation physics would consider impossible. This isn't my bird, Alina said after completing her inspection, but it's built on the same principles. Whoever designed this understood that stealth isn't just about hiding from radar, it's about becoming part of the environment you're moving through. Jackson watched his mother transform as she spoke, her voice taking on the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions in environments where mistakes weren't forgiven. The woman who had quietly served him breakfast that morning was disappearing, replaced by someone whose presence seemed to alter the air pressure around them. Santos consulted her tablet with obvious discomfort. The mission parameters call for insertion into a region that's officially under no-fly restrictions. We'd be crossing airspace controlled by at least 3 different hostile forces, through weather patterns that our meteorology department says shouldn't exist. Shouldn't exist or don't exist on any official maps? Alina asked. Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand the distinction. Alina's smile held no warmth. There are places on this planet where weather is a weapon, Chief Santos. Regions where atmospheric conditions are maintained artificially to deny access to conventional aircraft. What you're seeing in your meteorological data isn't natural weather. It's defensive systems designed to kill anything that tries to fly through them. The implications of what she was saying sent cold understanding through Jackson's chest. His mother hadn't just been a pilot. She had been someone who flew missions into areas that other people couldn't reach, using technology that officially didn't exist, through conditions that were actively hostile to human presence. Santos saved her work and closed the tablet with visible relief at ending the conversation. Ma'am, with respect, I'm not qualified to maintain aircraft designed for those kinds of operations. The liability alone. There is no liability, Alina interrupted gently. Because officially none of this is happening. The aircraft doesn't exist, the mission doesn't exist, and when it's over, we'll all go back to our regular duties and never speak of it again. She turned to Jackson with an expression that carried 20 years of accumulated worry. Including you. Whatever you see here, whatever you learn about who I used to be, it stays classified at levels that could destroy both our careers if it ever surfaces. Jackson nodded, but something in his mother's tone suggested that careers were the least of what might be destroyed if her past became public knowledge. The woman standing before him had been someone important enough to have enemies who would wait decades for revenge. Someone whose return to active duty would send ripples through intelligence communities that might prefer her to remain dead. As if summoned by his thoughts, Commander Kellerman appeared at the hangar entrance with the measured pace of someone bringing news that would change everything. We have confirmation on the missing team's locations, he announced. And Alina, you're not going to like where they are. Alina's expression didn't change, but Jackson caught the minute shift in her breathing that meant she was preparing for violence. Where, Marcus? The Kandahar Valley. Grid reference 342-876 Delta. Ring any bells? Alina went absolutely still, not the stillness of relaxation, but the predatory freeze of something deciding whether to fight or flee. When she spoke, her voice carried undertones that made Jackson's survival instincts scream warnings he didn't understand. That's where Lieutenant Commander Alina Voss died, she said quietly, and where silence was born. The briefing room felt like a tomb as satellite images flickered across multiple screens, showing terrain that looked more like a science fiction landscape than anywhere on Earth. Alina studied each photograph with the intensity of someone reading her own death warrant, while Jackson tried to process the idea that his mother had operated in environments that appeared actively hostile to human life. 3 teams, Commander Kellerman narrated as the images shifted. Alpha Team disappeared during a reconnaissance mission near the northern ridge. Bravo Team went dark while establishing an observation post in the valley floor. Charlie Team was providing overwatch from the eastern cliff face when their last transmission cut off mid-sentence. The terrain revealed by the satellite images defied easy description. Jagged mountains that seemed to twist impossible ways, valleys filled with shadows that didn't match the sun's position, and atmospheric distortions that made distance and scale difficult to judge. It looked like a place where the normal rules of geography had been suspended. Standard aircraft can't operate in that airspace, Alina said, pointing to meteorological data that scrolled along the bottom of the displays. The atmospheric pressure shifts create sheer winds that would tear conventional helicopters apart. That's why they built the modifications into my original bird, to handle environments where physics becomes optional. Jackson watched his mother analyze the data with professional detachment, but he caught the subtle signs of stress that 20 years of observation had taught him to recognize. The way her left hand unconsciously traced the scar on her forearm, The micro-movements that indicated she was calculating distances, approach vectors, and escape routes without conscious thought. Intelligence specialist Rebecca Kim entered with a classified tablet that seemed to make everyone in the room uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we've received additional intelligence on the area's defensive systems. What we're seeing isn't natural atmospheric disturbance. It's artificially generated using technology we don't fully understand." Alina accepted the tablet and scrolled through data that made her expression grow increasingly grim. "These energy signatures match patterns I've seen before. Whoever's controlling that airspace has access to weather manipulation systems that were theoretically destroyed years ago." "Theoretically?" Kellerman asked. "There were research programs during the height of the Cold War. Projects designed to weaponize atmospheric conditions, turning weather into a defensive system that could deny access to entire regions. Most of the research was abandoned when we realized the technology was too dangerous to deploy safely." Alina returned the tablet with hands that remained perfectly steady despite the implications of what she'd read. But someone apparently decided that safety was less important than controlling access to whatever's hidden in that valley. The room fell silent as the true scope of the mission became clear. They weren't just planning a rescue operation. They were preparing to infiltrate a region that had been turned into a fortress using technology that officially didn't exist, defended by systems that could kill them in ways that would never show up on any casualty report. Kim cleared her throat nervously. "Ma'am, there's one more thing. The energy signatures we're detecting from the valley floor suggest the presence of something that shouldn't be there. Something that might explain why those teams were sent in the first place." Alina's expression shifted into something that belonged on the face of the warrior in the old photograph, rather than the civilian woman who had raised Jackson. "Show me." The satellite image that appeared on the main screen made Jackson's breath catch. Deep in the valley floor, partially hidden by the atmospheric distortions, something metallic gleamed with reflections that seemed to come from light sources that weren't visible. The object was too regular to be natural, too large to be abandoned equipment, and too intact to have been there very long. "That," Alina said quietly, "is why Lieutenant Commander Alina Voss had to die, and why Silence is going to have to kill again." She stood with the fluid motion of someone transitioning from civilian to soldier, her entire bearing shifting into something that made the air in the room feel suddenly dangerous. "I need 4 hours to requalify on the modified systems. Then we're going to find out what's worth enough to sacrifice 3 special operations teams, and whether our people are still alive to rescue." The unspoken truth hung in the air between them, that this mission would either bring Alina Voss back from the dead or kill Silence permanently, with no middle ground for the woman who had tried to be both. The modified helicopter responded to Alina's touch like an instrument that had been waiting 20 years to be played correctly. Jackson watched from the observer's seat as his mother ran through pre-flight checks with the fluid precision of someone for whom the procedures had become muscle memory too deep to fade. Every switch, every gauge, every system response seemed to confirm that some kinds of training never deteriorated. They just waited dormant until circumstances demanded their return. "Control systems are responsive," Alina reported through the headset, her voice carrying the professional calm that Jackson was learning belonged to someone else entirely. "Stealth configurations are optimal. Environmental adapters are showing green across all parameters." Chief Santos monitored from the ground crew position, her tablet displaying readings that made her expression grow increasingly worried. "Ma'am, some of these system parameters are operating outside normal specifications. The power consumption alone suggests capabilities that shouldn't be possible with conventional aircraft." Alina's hands moved across controls that seemed more complex than necessary for simple flight operations, activating systems whose purposes Jackson couldn't identify. "Nothing about this aircraft is conventional, Chief. The power requirements you're seeing feed systems designed to bend physics rather than work within it. The helicopter lifted with surprising smoothness, rising into the afternoon air with less noise than Jackson would have expected from something its size. But more unsettling than the quiet operation was the way the aircraft seemed to disappear from his peripheral vision, even though he was sitting inside it. Looking down at the base, he realized that they had become effectively invisible from the ground. "Optical camouflage engaged," Alina announced, nodding his confusion. "The hull modifications don't just absorb radar, they bend light around the aircraft using principles that most physicists would say are impossible. We're not just hidden from detection systems, we're hidden from direct observation." They flew south toward the training area, but Jackson sensed this was more than familiarization with the aircraft's systems. His mother was testing something deeper, whether 20 years of civilian life had dulled whatever instincts had made her legendary, or if those skills remained intact beneath the surface of ordinary life. The answer became clear as they approached a simulated combat zone. Alina dropped the aircraft into a canyon approach that would have been suicidal for most pilots, threading between rock formations with margins for error measured in inches rather than feet. The helicopter moved through the terrain like water flowing around obstacles, finding paths that shouldn't have existed. "Environmental adaptation systems are compensating for wind shear," Alina reported, though Jackson suspected she was talking more to herself than to the ground crew monitoring their progress. "Atmospheric processors are maintaining stable flight characteristics despite local pressure variations." What she wasn't reporting was the way she seemed to anticipate changes in air pressure before the instruments registered them, or how she navigated through the canyon using landmarks that weren't visible to anyone else. This wasn't just technical proficiency. It was something that bordered on supernatural awareness of her environment. They emerged from the canyon into open airspace, and Alina immediately began evasion maneuvers that turned the helicopter into something that defied easy tracking. The aircraft moved through the sky like it was dancing with air currents rather than fighting against them, achieving flight characteristics that seemed to bend the basic rules of aerodynamics. "How is this possible?" Jackson asked finally, his voice tight with awe and growing unease. Alina's response came through the headset with the weight of confession. "Because the woman who designed these modifications understood that sometimes saving lives requires technology that exists at the edge of what's possible. And because the pilot who flew the original version of this aircraft learned to become part of the machine rather than just operating it." She brought the helicopter back toward base with movements that seemed to anticipate the aircraft's responses before she made them. The integration between pilot and machine was so seamless that Jackson began to understand why her call sign had been silence. Not just because she moved quietly, but because she had learned to become part of the environment she operated in. As they approached the landing pad, Alina's voice carried undertones that made Jackson realize their training flight had revealed something neither of them had expected. "I'm still her," Alina said quietly. "After 20 years of trying to be someone else, I'm still the pilot who could fly anywhere and bring everyone home. Which means tomorrow, I'm going into that valley and our people are coming out alive." The certainty in her voice should have been reassuring, but Jackson heard something beneath it that made his survival instincts whisper warnings about the cost of resurrections. Dawn broke over Coronado like a reluctant revelation, casting the airfield in the kind of gray light that made everything look like it belonged in someone else's war. Jackson stood beside the modified helicopter, watching his mother complete her final preparations with the methodical precision of someone who understood that overlooked details killed people. She had been awake since 300 running system checks that went far beyond standard protocols. The mission gear laid out on the hangar floor told a story of capabilities that existed beyond normal military operations. Alina's flight suit incorporated technology that seemed designed by engineers who understood that pilots operating in impossible environments needed equipment that could adapt to conditions that didn't officially exist. The helmet alone contained systems whose functions Jackson could only guess at. Atmospheric adaptation systems, Alina explained, nodding his curiosity as she checked the helmet's internal electronics. When you're flying through airspace where pressure, temperature, and oxygen levels change without warning, standard life support isn't sufficient. This gear monitors my physiology and adjusts environmental conditions to keep me functional even when the outside world becomes actively hostile to human life. Commander Kellerman approached with final mission documents that carried classifications Jackson had never seen. Intelligence reports suggest the atmospheric disturbances in the target area have intensified over the past 12 hours. Whatever's generating those conditions is becoming more active. Alina accepted the documents without reading them, sliding them into a secure pocket with the casual dismissal of someone who knew that plans rarely survived contact with reality. Increased activity means they know someone's coming. The defensive systems are responding to anticipated threats. Or they're protecting something that can't be moved quickly, Kellerman suggested. Which means our people are either very close to discovering something important, or they've already found it and can't extract because the area's been locked down around them. Alina sealed her gear with movements that belonged to someone transitioning into a state of mind where failure wasn't acceptable. Either way, time is working against us. Jackson watched his mother transform as she spoke, her civilian identity disappearing beneath layers of tactical awareness and professional competence that 20 years of ordinary life hadn't diminished. The woman standing before him was someone who could fly into regions where other people died, using skills that existed at the intersection of training and instinct. Chief Santos approached with final systems reports that made her expression suggest she was watching someone prepare for suicide. Ma'am, atmospheric conditions in the target area are unlike anything in our meteorological database. The pressure variations alone would destroy conventional aircraft, and the electromagnetic interference patterns suggest energy signatures that our instruments can't properly classify. Alina's response came with the calm authority of someone who had operated in environments that existed beyond normal human experience. Chief, there are places on this planet where the normal rules don't apply. Regions where atmospheric conditions are maintained artificially, where electromagnetic fields are weaponized, where the environment itself becomes hostile to human presence. The modifications on this aircraft were designed specifically to operate in those conditions. She moved toward the helicopter with the fluid grace of someone whose body had memorized procedures that her mind couldn't forget. The question isn't whether I can fly through those conditions. It's whether I can do it fast enough to extract our people before whatever's generating those defensive systems decides that killing them is preferable to letting them be rescued. As Alina settled into the pilot's seat, Jackson realized he was watching someone return to a version of herself that had been dormant for 2 decades. The civilian mother who had raised him was disappearing, replaced by a warrior whose legend had been whispered through special operations communities long before he was born. "Bring them home, Mom," he said through the headset, the words carrying more weight than he had intended. Alina's response came with the quiet confidence of someone whose promises had never been broken. "That's what silence does, Jackson. That's all she's ever done." The helicopter lifted into the morning sky with less sound than should have been possible, disappearing into atmospheric conditions that would challenge the most advanced aircraft ever designed. Jackson watched until even his enhanced optics couldn't track the machine, leaving him alone with the understanding that his mother was flying towards something that had already killed the best operators in the military. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't certain she would come back. The helicopter moved through hostile airspace like a ghost navigating between worlds. Its stealth systems, adapting to electromagnetic interference that would have destroyed conventional aircraft. Alina flew with the fluid precision of someone who had learned to read atmospheric conditions, the way other people read facial expressions, anticipating changes in pressure and wind patterns before the instruments registered them. The modified systems responded to her touch, with the seamless integration of pilot and machine that had made her legendary. Approaching target area perimeter, she reported through encrypted communications that barely penetrated the electromagnetic storm surrounding the valley. Defensive systems are active. I'm reading energy signatures consistent with weather manipulation technology, but the patterns are more complex than anything in our historical database. The airspace ahead looked like a wall of distorted atmosphere, with pressure gradients that created visual effects resembling heat mirages stacked vertically into the sky. Lightning flickered through clouds that shouldn't have existed at this altitude, and wind patterns shifted with the mechanical regularity that indicated artificial generation rather than natural weather. Alina guided the helicopter through the outer barrier, using flight techniques that existed at the edge of what was possible with conventional physics. The aircraft's environmental adaptation systems worked to maintain stable flight characteristics as atmospheric pressure shifted around them, but she could feel the technology being pushed beyond its design parameters. First defensive layer penetrated, she reported, though static was beginning to interfere with communications. I'm seeing evidence of multiple overlapping systems. Whoever designed this defensive network understood that redundancy is the key to denying access to hostile aircraft. The valley floor appeared through breaks in the artificial weather, revealing terrain that looked more like an archaeological site than a natural landscape. Structures that appeared to be partially buried caught reflected light in ways that suggested metallic composition, while geometric patterns carved into the rock formations indicated human modification of the natural environment. Alina descended through the defensive layers using approaches that would have been impossible without her aircraft's modifications, threading between energy fields that could have disabled conventional helicopters. Her hands moved across controls with the unconscious precision of someone whose training had become muscle memory too deep to analyze. Contact with Alpha Team's last known position, she announced as her sensors detected electronic signatures consistent with military equipment. I'm reading faint power sources that could be emergency beacons, but they're being masked by the electromagnetic interference. She brought the helicopter down in a landing that was more controlled crash than standard procedure, using techniques designed for inserting into hostile territory where normal landing zones didn't exist. The aircraft settled onto uneven terrain with systems automatically adjusting to maintain stability on ground that seemed to shift beneath them. Alina powered down to minimum operational status and prepared for ground operations, sealing her environmental systems against atmospheric conditions that her instruments indicated were actively toxic to human life. The air outside contained chemical compositions that shouldn't have existed naturally, suggesting that the defensive systems extended beyond weather manipulation into biological warfare. Moving toward Alpha Team's last known position, she encountered evidence of their presence, equipment caches that had been secured according to standard protocols, defensive positions that showed tactical competence, and most importantly, signs that the team had been alive and organized when they established their final position. What she didn't find were bodies, or blood, or any indication of combat that had ended with casualties. Instead, she found footprints leading deeper into the valley, toward structures that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. The tracks were organized, purposeful, and led in a direction that suggested the team had discovered something worth investigating despite the obvious dangers. Alina followed the trail with weapons ready, but growing certainty that her mission had become something more complex than a simple extraction. Alpha Team hadn't been killed or captured. They had found something in this valley that had made them abandon their original mission parameters. And as she approached the largest of the partially buried structures, Alina began to understand that bringing them home might require discovering what they had found, and whether it was worth the price they had paid to find it. The structure that Alpha Team had discovered defied easy categorization, its geometry suggesting engineering principles that human technology hadn't mastered. Alina approached with weapons ready, but found herself increasingly certain that whatever had drawn the missing operators deeper into the valley wasn't immediately hostile. The building, if that's what it was, seemed to pulse with internal light that responded to her presence, growing brighter as she moved closer. "This is silence to control," she reported through communications that were barely functional in the electromagnetic interference. "I've located evidence of Alpha Team's presence, but their status appears more complex than simple extraction scenario. Investigating further." The entrance to the structure had been modified recently, with tool marks that indicated military equipment had been used to create access where none had existed before. Alina recognized the precision of the work. Alpha Team had approached this discovery with the methodical care of professionals who understood they were dealing with something unprecedented. Inside, the structure revealed itself as something that challenged basic assumptions about what was possible. The walls seemed to be made of materials that absorbed and redirected light, creating an environment where shadows behaved according to rules that defied physics. Corridors branched in directions that shouldn't have been structurally possible, and the air itself felt different, thicker, somehow more substantial than normal atmosphere. Alina followed the signs of Alpha Team's passage through chambers that contained technology she couldn't identify, past displays that showed information in languages that predated human civilization. The evidence suggested that the team had spent considerable time here, not as prisoners, but as investigators trying to understand what they had discovered. She found them in the central chamber. All 8 members of Alpha Team stood before a display that showed star patterns which seemed to move independently of any celestial mechanics Alina understood. They were alive, alert, and completely absorbed in information that appeared to be updating in real time. When she called their names, they acknowledged her presence without turning away from their work. "Lieutenant Commander," Alpha Team Leader Staff Sergeant Michael Torres said without looking at her, "we were hoping someone would follow our trail. What we found here changes everything we thought we knew about human history and our place in the universe." Alina moved closer, studying the display that had captured their complete attention. The star patterns were accompanied by data streams in languages she didn't recognize, but the mathematical relationships were complex enough to suggest scientific information of staggering sophistication. "Sergeant, your orders were to conduct reconnaissance and report back. Your team has been missing for 6 days, with Bravo and Charlie teams disappearing while searching for you. The outside world believes you're dead or captured." Torres finally turned toward her, and Alina saw something in his expression that made her understand why the team had abandoned their original mission. It wasn't the look of someone who had been compromised or coerced. It was the expression of someone who had discovered something so significant that previous priorities had become irrelevant. "Ma'am, this facility contains information about threats to Earth that make our current military operations look like training exercises. We're looking at intelligence data that suggests our planet has been under surveillance for centuries, and that the surveillance is increasing in preparation for something that's going to happen soon." Alina studied the displays with growing comprehension that what Alpha Team had discovered wasn't just archaeologically significant. It was strategically critical to human survival. The geometric patterns and mathematical relationships suggested technology sophisticated enough to monitor and possibly influence human development on a planetary scale. "Show me," she said, holstering her weapons and moving to stand beside Torres. What she saw in the next few minutes made her understand that this mission had never been about simple extraction. Alpha Team had discovered evidence of non-human intelligence that had been observing Earth, and the information they were accessing suggested that observation was transitioning into something more direct. The question now was whether humanity was ready for that transition, and whether the military leadership that had sent her here would understand that some discoveries were too important to classify and too dangerous to ignore. Alina activated her communications array with modifications that bypass the Valley's defensive systems. Control, this is silence. Mission parameters have changed. We're going to need a bigger helicopter. The modified helicopter strained under a payload. It was never designed to carry, as Alina extracted Alpha Team and critical data storage devices from the underground facility. The aircraft's systems compensated for the additional weight and electromagnetic interference from the recovered technology, but she could feel the aircraft operating at the edge of its capabilities. Behind her, the 8 rescued operators worked frantically to secure information that could redefine humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. Bravo and Charlie teams' positions identified, Staff Sergeant Torres reported through the headset. They're not in distress. They're conducting security operations around 2 other facilities that show similar architectural characteristics. The entire valley appears to be some kind of research complex that's been dormant until recently. Alina adjusted their flight path toward the coordinates Torres provided, navigating through atmospheric disturbances that seemed to be intensifying as they moved deeper into the valley. The defensive systems weren't trying to keep them out anymore. They were trying to keep something else contained. What triggered the reactivation? Alina asked as they approached the position where Bravo Team should have been located. The electromagnetic signatures we detected 3 weeks ago, Torres replied, his voice tight with implications that Alina was beginning to understand. Our intelligence analysts thought they were evidence of foreign weapons testing. What we found was technology responding to something approaching Earth from outside our solar system. Alina felt the bottom drop out of her understanding of what this mission had become. She had volunteered to extract missing special operations teams, not to discover evidence that humanity was about to make contact with non-human intelligence. The weight of that realization made the helicopter's control stick feel heavier in her hands. They located Bravo Team, positioned around a second facility that pulsed with the same internal light Alina had observed at Alpha Team's location. The 8 operators were alive and organized, but completely absorbed in monitoring activities that appeared to be automated responses to external stimuli their equipment couldn't identify. Bravo Team Leader, this is silence, Alina announced through the communications array. Prepare for immediate extraction. We have Alpha Team aboard and are moving to consolidate all units. Bravo Team Leader Technical Sergeant Lisa Park responded without moving from her observation position. Silence. We cannot abandon these positions. The facilities are showing increased activity patterns that suggest they're preparing for some kind of operational activation. If we leave now, we lose our only opportunity to understand what's happening here. Alina brought the helicopter down in a landing zone that Park's team had secured, but kept the rotors turning. Time was becoming a critical factor, and she could feel the atmospheric conditions around them continuing to intensify. Whatever was causing the defensive systems to strengthen their coverage was getting closer. Sergeant, what exactly are you monitoring? Alina asked as she moved toward Park's position. What she saw made her understand why 3 special operations teams had abandoned their extraction timeline. The second facility contained displays that showed real-time tracking data for objects moving through space toward Earth. The trajectories were too precise to be natural phenomena, and the approach vectors suggested intelligence behind their movement. Ma'am, we're looking at evidence of at least 12 objects on approach vectors that will bring them into Earth's atmosphere within the next 72 hours, Park reported. The mathematics involved in their navigation patterns indicate technology that's orders of magnitude more advanced than anything humans have developed. Alina studied the tracking displays with growing comprehension that this mission had become something far beyond military protocol. What the teams had discovered wasn't just archaeological evidence of past visitation. It was real-time intelligence about imminent contact with non-human intelligence. The implications were staggering. If the approaching objects contained hostile forces, Earth's military capabilities would be completely inadequate for defense. If they contained peaceful explorers, humanity's first contact with alien intelligence was going to happen without any preparation or planning by civilian leadership. Either way, the information the teams had gathered was too critical to be buried in military classification systems. This was intelligence that required immediate dissemination to the highest levels of government and possibly to the international community. Alina activated her emergency communications protocols, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach military leadership, intelligence agencies, and international monitoring stations. Priority alpha traffic, this is silence with flash override classification. Contact imminent. Repeat, contact imminent. The third facility where Charlie team had established their position dwarfed the previous two structures, its geometric complexity suggesting engineering capabilities that made human architecture look primitive by comparison. Alina approached with all three teams now consolidated aboard her overloaded aircraft, the helicopter struggling to maintain stable flight as atmospheric conditions continued to deteriorate around them. Charlie team reports the largest facility is showing exponential increases in activity. Tors informed her through the headset. Whatever's approaching Earth, this complex appears to be preparing to receive it. Alina could see the truth of that assessment as they descended toward Charlie team's position. The massive structure pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to be communicating with something beyond the Earth's atmosphere, sending and receiving signals that created visible distortions in the air around them. The geometric patterns carved into the surrounding landscape were beginning to glow with their own internal luminescence. Charlie team leader Master Sergeant David Kim met them at the landing zone with an expression that combined professional competence with barely controlled amazement. "Ma'am, what we're seeing here suggests this entire valley is some kind of communication and reception facility. The technology involved appears capable of managing contact between civilizations on an interplanetary scale." Alina shut down the helicopter's engines, accepting that they would need time to understand what they were dealing with before attempting extraction. The aircraft's stealth systems would provide some protection, but she was beginning to suspect that the approaching entities already knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. "Show me everything," she commanded as they moved toward the largest facility. The interior revealed chambers that seemed to extend far deeper into the Earth than should have been possible, with technology that operated according to principles Alina couldn't identify. The walls themselves appeared to be alive with information flow, displaying data streams that updated continuously as conditions changed in space around Earth. "The approaching objects are adjusting their trajectories," Kim reported as he led them toward the central command chamber. "Based on the mathematical models we've been able to analyze, they're not following ballistic paths. These are controlled approach vectors that suggest the ability to modify course in real time." Alina studied displays that showed Earth's position relative to the approaching objects, with trajectory lines that indicated precise navigation toward specific locations on the planet's surface. The landing sites appeared to have been selected based on criteria that included proximity to major population centers, strategic military installations, and locations like this valley, where reception facilities had been hidden for unknown periods of time. "How long do we have?" Alina asked. "Based on current approach speeds and trajectory modifications, first contact will occur in approximately 48 hours, Kim replied. "But ma'am, there's something else. The facilities aren't just monitoring the approaching objects, they're communicating with them. We're looking at two-way information exchange that's been active for at least the past week. Alina felt the weight of that revelation settle into her understanding of the situation. This wasn't first contact. It was the culmination of communication that had already been established. Whatever was approaching Earth, it had been coordinating with technology that had been hidden on the planet's surface, possibly for decades or centuries. The question now was whether that coordination represented preparation for peaceful contact or invasion planning, and whether the military leadership that had sent her here would be able to process information that challenged every assumption about humanity's isolation in the universe. Alina activated her enhanced communications array, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. The information the teams had gathered was too critical to be filtered through normal intelligence channels. Flash override to all stations. This is Operation Nightingale. Recommend immediate elevation to National Command Authority. Contact is not imminent. Contact is already underway. The communications array crackled with responses from military commands around the world as Alina's flash override message reached decision makers who had never expected to deal with extraterrestrial contact scenarios. Behind her, the three special operations teams worked to document everything they had discovered, using equipment that was barely adequate for recording technology that operated beyond human understanding. "Silence, this is CENTCOM forward," came the response through encryption that Alina recognized as the highest classification levels. "Authenticate your position and situation report. Be advised, satellite imagery of your location shows atmospheric disturbances that are affecting global weather patterns." Alina looked around at the facility that pulsed with increasing activity, understanding that what they had discovered was already having planetary-scale effects. CENTCOM, authentication code Nightingale 77 Bravo. Situation is contact with non-human intelligence infrastructure. Repeat, we have confirmed contact with active alien technology on Earth. The silence that followed stretched long enough for Alina to wonder if her transmission had been lost in the electromagnetic interference surrounding the valley. When responses finally came, they arrived from multiple commands simultaneously, creating a cacophony of voices demanding clarification, confirmation, and impossible to provide proof. "All stations, this is silence," Alina broadcast, using command authority that came from 20 years of leading impossible missions. "Recommend immediate implementation of contact protocols if they exist. If not, recommend development of contact protocols within the next 48 hours, because that's when the entities currently approaching Earth will arrive." Master Sergeant Kim approached with data that made Alina understand the true scope of what they were dealing with. "Ma'am, we've identified 7 other locations around the globe showing similar activation patterns. This isn't an isolated phenomenon. It's a coordinated response to something that's been planned for a very long time." Alina studied the global positioning data that Kim's team had extracted from the facility's information systems. The other activation sites were distributed across all continents, positioned near major population centers, but hidden in locations that had avoided human detection until now. The coordination required to maintain that level of concealment suggested intelligence gathering and strategic planning that spanned decades. "The entities approaching Earth already know everything about our military capabilities, our population distribution, our technological development, and our political structures," Alina realized aloud. "This isn't first contact. It's the end of a very long period of covert observation." Tours joined them with information that added another layer of complexity to an already unprecedented situation. "Ma'am, the communication protocols we've been monitoring suggest the approaching entities are responding to some kind of signal that originated from Earth. Someone or something on our planet initiated this contact sequence." Alina felt the implications of that revelation spread through her understanding like cold water. If Torres was correct, then first contact wasn't happening to humanity. It was happening because of decisions made by humans who had access to technology and information that remained classified beyond anything she had ever encountered. The question was whether those decisions had been made by legitimate government authority, or by individuals or organizations that had been operating without oversight for unknown periods of time, and whether the contact they had initiated would prove beneficial or catastrophic for human civilization. Alina activated emergency protocols that would route her communications directly to the National Security Council, bypassing normal military channels that might not be equipped to handle information of this magnitude. NSC Emergency Desk. This is Operation Nightingale with Flash Override National Emergency. Request immediate conference with highest available authority. Topic is confirmed extraterrestrial contact with Earth. As she waited for responses that would change human history, Alina looked around at the three special operations teams who had stumbled into the most significant discovery in human history while conducting routine reconnaissance. They had volunteered for military service. They had not volunteered to become the first humans to document proof of alien intelligence. But history had made that choice for them, and now they were responsible for information that could either elevate human civilization or destroy it entirely. The National Security Council's response came through channels so heavily encrypted that Alina's communications array required 3 separate authentication protocols before the connection stabilized. When the voice finally emerged through the static, it carried the weight of authority that belonged to someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions of lives. Nightingale, this is Granite 6. Authenticate your credentials and provide verification of your extraordinary claims. Be advised, we have satellite confirmation of atmospheric anomalies at your location, but require substantial proof before accepting your contact scenario. Alina looked around at the facility that pulsed with alien technology, at the displays showing approaching spacecraft, at the 3 special operations teams who had spent days documenting evidence that challenged every assumption about humanity's place in the universe. The request for proof would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so high. Granite 6, recommend immediate conference with astronomy departments at major universities. Cross-reference astronomical observations from the past 2 weeks with trajectory data I'm transmitting now. The approaching objects will be visible to Earth-based telescopes within the next 12 hours. She activated the facility's transmission systems, using alien technology to broadcast mathematical proof of extraterrestrial contact to human authorities who would struggle to accept what their own instruments would confirm. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was using alien technology to prove the existence of aliens. Technical Sergeant Park approached with data that added urgency to an already critical situation. Ma'am, the facility's activity patterns suggest the approaching entities expect some kind of response from Earth-based systems. If we don't provide the correct response, they may interpret our silence as hostility. Alina studied the communication protocols that Park's team had partially decoded, understanding that they were looking at the alien equivalent of air traffic control systems. The approaching spacecraft were following established procedures for contact, but those procedures required responses that only the hidden Earth-based facilities could provide. What happens if we don't respond? Alina asked. Based on the mathematical models we've analyzed, the approaching entities have contingency protocols for unresponsive contact sites, Kim replied. Those contingencies appear to include options for forced landing and direct intervention in human affairs. Alina felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She commanded the most advanced aircraft in Earth's military arsenal, had access to 3 special operations teams trained for impossible missions, and was standing in an alien facility that could potentially influence first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. But she was also operating without orders, without authority, and without any precedent for the decisions she was being forced to make. The choice was between responding to alien contact protocols using technology she didn't understand, or allowing first contact to proceed according to alien preferences rather than human ones. Either option could result in outcomes that would define human civilization's future. Alina activated the facility's response systems, using procedures that Park's team had decoded from the alien communication protocols. The technology responded to her commands with precision that suggested it had been designed for human operation, though by humans who had access to information that remained classified beyond her security clearance. Granite 6, this is Nightingale. I am initiating first contact protocols using alien technology located on Earth. Recommend immediate preparation for formal first contact within the next 24 hours. The entities approaching Earth expect professional diplomatic contact, not military response. The silence that followed her transmission suggested she had just made decisions that exceeded her authority by several orders of magnitude. But as the facility around them responded to her commands, beginning communication sequences with the approaching spacecraft, Alina understood that history had placed her in a position where someone had to make those decisions. Whether they were the right decisions would become clear very soon. The alien facility responded to Alina's commands like an instrument that had been waiting for the correct operator, its systems coming online with increasing sophistication as communication with the approaching spacecraft intensified. Around her, the three special operations teams worked to document protocols and procedures that would need to be transmitted to Earth's leadership before formal contact began. Communication established with lead approaching vessel. Tours reported from the Central Command Station. They're transmitting what appears to be diplomatic credentials and requesting confirmation of Earth's representative authority for contact proceedings. Alina found herself in the unprecedented position of representing human civilization in first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, despite having no diplomatic training and no authority beyond her military rank. The absurdity of the situation would have been overwhelming if the stakes weren't so historically significant. What kind of credentials are they requesting? Alina asked as she studied displays that showed increasingly complex information exchanges between the facility and the approaching spacecraft. Mathematical proof of technological sophistication, evidence of unified planetary government, and confirmation of species-wide consensus for contact, Kim replied after analyzing the alien transmission protocols. Essentially, they want to know if humanity is ready for formal diplomatic relations. Alina felt the weight of that question settle into her understanding of humanity's current political and technological state. The approaching aliens were expecting to deal with a unified planetary civilization that had achieved consensus on extraterrestrial contact. What they would find was a species divided by competing national interests, religious differences, and technological disparities that made unified response nearly impossible. Can we fake it? Alina asked, understanding that honest assessment of humanity's readiness might result in the aliens deciding to postpone contact indefinitely. The facility appears designed to present Earth in the best possible light, Park replied. The technology is sophisticated enough to generate responses that suggest higher levels of civilization than humanity has actually achieved. But that would require us to commit to representing Earth in negotiations we're not qualified to conduct. Alina looked around at the alien technology that hummed with increasing activity, understanding that every minute of delay brought the approaching spacecraft closer to Earth's atmosphere. Soon, the choice between responding and remaining silent would be made for them by entities whose intentions remained unknown. Granite 6, this is Nightingale. Alina transmitted through channels that connected her to the highest levels of human authority. Require immediate guidance on diplomatic response to formal first contact scenario. The approaching entities expect unified planetary response within the next 6 hours. The response came through encryption that carried presidential-level authority. Nightingale, you are designated Earth's interim representative for first contact proceedings. Conduct initial diplomatic contact using your best judgment. Full diplomatic authority will be transmitted within 12 hours. Alina stared at the transmission, understanding that she had just been given responsibility for decisions that would affect human civilization's future. She was being asked to negotiate with alien intelligence using technology she barely understood, representing a species whose leadership was still coming to terms with the reality of extraterrestrial contact. Team leaders prepare for formal first contact, Alina announced to the 3 special operations teams. We're about to make history, and we're going to do it professionally. She activated the facility's diplomatic protocols, following procedures that the alien technology guided her through with increasing sophistication. The communication array connected her directly to the approaching spacecraft, establishing real-time contact with intelligence that had been observing Earth for unknown periods of time. This is Alina Voss, interim representative of Earth, responding to your request for diplomatic contact. She transmitted through alien technology toward entities whose nature and intentions remained completely unknown. The response came immediately, in mathematical concepts that translated into recognizable language through the facility's systems. Acknowledged, Representative Voss. We have been monitoring your species' development and are pleased to initiate formal diplomatic relations. Prepare for arrival of diplomatic mission in 18 hours. Alina looked around at her teams, understanding that they had just committed human civilization to its first formal diplomatic contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, with less than a day to prepare for negotiations that would define humanity's future. The 18 hours between first contact and the arrival of the alien diplomatic mission passed in a blur of activity that transformed the hidden valley into humanity's first extraterrestrial embassy. Alina coordinated between the alien facility's automated systems and human military responses that were being improvised by leadership who had never expected to deal with interplanetary diplomacy. Diplomatic vessel on final approach. Tours reported from monitoring stations that tracked the alien craft with precision that human radar couldn't match. Estimated arrival in 47 minutes. The ship is significantly larger than anything in our aerospace inventory. Alina looked up at skis that showed no visible evidence of the approaching vessel, but the alien facility's displays revealed a craft whose dimensions challenged assumptions about what was possible with propulsion technology. The diplomatic mission was arriving in a ship that dwarfed human aircraft carriers, suggesting technological capabilities that made Earth's military power irrelevant to any potential conflict. Status report from Granite 6. Alina requested through communications that connected her to human leadership struggling to process the reality of extraterrestrial contact. Nightingale, this is Granite 6. Full diplomatic team is en route to your location, ETA 16 hours. You are authorized to conduct preliminary negotiations pending arrival of official representatives. Do not commit Earth to any binding agreements without explicit authorization. Alina understood the impossible position that instruction placed her in. She was being asked to negotiate with alien intelligence whose technological superiority was absolute, while representing a species whose leadership wouldn't arrive until after first contact had already been completed. Whatever happened in the next few hours would establish the framework for all future human-alien relations. The facility's systems activated with increasing sophistication as the alien diplomatic vessel approached, revealing chambers that had been dormant until contact became imminent. The technology guided Alina and her teams through preparation procedures that suggested the hidden facility had been designed specifically for this moment. Atmospheric entry confirmed, Kim reported as displays showed the alien vessel beginning its descent toward Earth. The ship is using propulsion systems that don't match any known physics. They're somehow managing controlled atmospheric entry without generating heat signatures that would be visible to human detection systems. Alina watched through the facility's monitoring systems as the alien ship descended through Earth's atmosphere with movements that seemed to ignore basic principles of aerodynamics. The craft moved through the air like it was navigating through space, unaffected by atmospheric pressure, wind patterns, or gravitational forces that would have challenged human aircraft. Touchdown in designated landing area, Tours announced as the alien vessel settled onto the valley floor with precision that suggested complete mastery of controlled flight. The ship appears to be generating its own stable landing zone using technology that's modifying the local environment. Alina sealed her environmental suit and activated communication systems that would allow her to represent humanity in face-to-face contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but 20 years of leading impossible missions had taught her to function effectively under pressure that would paralyze most people. Team leaders establish security perimeter but avoid any actions that could be interpreted as hostile, Alina commanded as they prepared to exit the facility. We're dealing with technology that makes human weapons irrelevant, so our only option is professional diplomatic conduct. As they moved toward the landing site, Alina understood that the next few hours would determine whether humanity's first contact with alien intelligence led to peaceful coexistence or domination by entities whose capabilities exceeded human understanding. The three special operations teams who had stumbled into this discovery were about to become Earth's first ambassadors to an interstellar civilization. Alina activated her communications array, broadcasting to human leadership who were still struggling to accept the reality of what was happening. Granite 6, this is Nightingale, initiating face-to-face contact with extraterrestrial diplomatic mission. Whatever happens next, remember that they chose to come here peacefully. As the alien ship's entry ramp descended, revealing entities whose appearance would challenge human assumptions about life in the universe, Alina walked forward to represent her species in the most important diplomatic contact in human history. The beings that emerged from the alien vessel defied Alina's expectations while somehow seeming familiar, their appearance suggesting evolutionary paths that had produced intelligence without abandoning graceful movement or aesthetic sense. They stood roughly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs that moved with fluid precision, and features that combined angular geometry with organic curves in ways that human art had never achieved. Representative Voss, the lead entity, spoke through translation technology that rendered their communication in Alina's native language with perfect clarity. I am Coordinator Thane of the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. We are pleased that Earth has achieved sufficient technological and social development to warrant formal contact. Alina stepped forward with the bearing that 20 years of military service had taught her, representing humanity despite having no diplomatic training for interspecies contact. Coordinator Thane, welcome to Earth. I am honored to represent my species in this historic meeting. The aliens' response carried undertones that suggested amusement at the situation they found themselves in. Representative Voss, we are aware that you are not your species' designated diplomatic authority. We also understand that your species lacks unified planetary government. However, your individual qualifications for this role exceed those of many beings who claim official diplomatic status. Alina felt a chill of understanding that the aliens had been monitoring human affairs with sufficient detail to evaluate individual human capabilities. They knew more about her background than most humans in her own government, and had apparently chosen to proceed with contact despite Earth's political fragmentation. Coordinator Thane, what can you tell us about your intentions regarding Earth and humanity? Alina asked, understanding that the answer would determine whether first contact proceeded peacefully or required human civilization to adapt to alien oversight. Our intentions are observational and educational, Thane replied, gesturing toward technology that materialized around them without visible mechanisms. Your species has reached technological development levels that qualify for contact, but has not yet achieved social development that qualifies for full membership in the galactic community. The implications of that statement suggested that humanity was being evaluated for membership in some kind of interstellar organization, with criteria that included social development as well as technological capability. Alina realized she was conducting negotiations that would determine humanity's future relationship with galactic civilization. What would full membership require? Alina asked. Unified planetary governance, elimination of violent conflict between population groups, and technological development that demonstrates mastery of sustainable resource management, Thane replied. Your species shows promise in technological advancement, but significant deficiencies in social cooperation and environmental stewardship. Alina understood that she was looking at humanity's future from the perspective of a galactic civilization that had watched countless species either achieve interstellar membership or fail to develop beyond planetary isolation. The aliens weren't here to conquer or exploit Earth. They were here to determine whether humanity deserved to join a community of spacefaring civilizations. How long do we have to achieve those requirements? Alina asked. Time is not the limiting factor, Thane replied. Development is the limiting factor. Some species achieve membership qualifications within decades of first contact. Others require centuries. A few never qualify and remain isolated until their civilizations collapse. The weight of that assessment settled into Alina's understanding of what first contact meant for humanity. This wasn't the beginning of human expansion into space. It was an examination that would determine whether humans would be allowed to expand beyond Earth, or would remain quarantined until they either evolved or destroyed themselves. Alina activated her communications array, transmitting to human leadership, who needed to understand that first contact was actually a test, whose results would determine humanity's cosmic future. Granite 6, this is Nightingale. First contact is proceeding peacefully, but humanity is being evaluated for membership in galactic civilization. Recommend immediate consultation with world leaders on unified planetary response to qualification requirements. As alien technology continued to materialize around them, Alina realized that the hidden facility had been built to facilitate this evaluation, and that her role was not just to represent humanity, but to help determine whether her species deserved to survive its adolescence as a cosmic civilization. The evaluation chamber that Coordinator Thane materialized around them resembled a cross between a diplomatic conference room and a sophisticated laboratory, with technology that monitored biological, psychological, and intellectual responses while maintaining an atmosphere of formal, respectful contact. Alina found herself sitting across from beings whose presence radiated intelligence that operated on scales beyond human experience. The evaluation process requires comprehensive assessment of your species' current development level, Thane explained as displays materialized showing Earth from orbital perspective. We will examine technological capabilities, social organization, conflict resolution methods, and environmental management practices. Alina watched data streams that revealed humanity from the perspective of observers who had been monitoring Earth for unknown periods of time. The information displayed included everything from military capabilities to artistic achievements, from political structures to religious beliefs, from scientific advancement to environmental impact. Your species demonstrates remarkable technological advancement for your developmental stage, Thane observed as the displays showed human achievements in aerospace, telecommunications, and computational technology. However, you also demonstrate concerning patterns in resource consumption, territorial conflict, and social inequality. The assessment continued with analysis that revealed humanity through alien eyes that had observed countless civilizations at similar development stages. Alina realized she was watching her species being evaluated using criteria that determined which civilizations survived to join galactic community and which remained isolated until they either evolved or collapsed. What can humanity do to improve our evaluation? Alina asked, understanding that her question was essentially asking how her species could save itself from cosmic quarantine. Demonstrate capacity for unified response to existential challenges, Thane replied. Your species' tendency toward fragmented authority and competitive resource allocation represents the primary obstacle to membership qualification. Alina felt the weight of that assessment, understanding that humanity's political divisions and national competition were being viewed as evolutionary failures by entities whose civilizations had successfully transcended those limitations. The aliens weren't judging human politics by human standards. They were evaluating human development by cosmic standards that most humans had never considered. Coordinator Thane, what happens if humanity fails this evaluation? Alina asked. Isolation until your species either achieves qualification standards or experiences civilizational collapse, Thane replied with what Alina interpreted as regret. We do not intervene in species development, except to prevent expansion beyond planetary boundaries before qualification requirements are met. The implication was staggering. Humanity's future in space depended not on technological development, which Earth had already achieved, but on social development that required fundamental changes in human political organization and resource management. The aliens had the power to enforce quarantine that would prevent human expansion until those changes occurred. Alina activated her communications array, knowing that human leadership needed to understand the stakes involved in first contact. Granite 6, this is Nightingale. The alien evaluation will determine whether humanity is allowed to expand beyond Earth. Recommend immediate international consultation on unified planetary response to galactic membership requirements. As the evaluation continued, Alina realized that her role had evolved beyond representing humanity in first contact. She was now responsible for helping her species understand that cosmic civilization required social development that exceeded anything humans had previously achieved. The question was whether humanity could evolve quickly enough to pass an examination administered by beings whose patience was measured in geological time, and whose standards had been refined by observing thousands of civilizations, either succeed or fail at the transition from planetary to cosmic existence. Alina looked around at the three special operations teams who had discovered evidence of humanity's cosmic examination, understanding that they had become witnesses to the most important test in human history, a test that humanity might not be ready to pass. The evaluation progressed through assessments that revealed humanity's achievements and failures from perspectives that Alina had never considered possible. Coordinator Thane's analysis included environmental data that showed Earth's ecological systems under stress patterns that threatened long-term planetary habitability, alongside social data that revealed conflict patterns occurring at scales from individual to international level. Your species shows promising developments in cooperative problem-solving, Thane observed as displays showed human responses to global challenges like pandemic management and natural disaster response. However, these cooperative efforts remain temporary and limited in scope, reverting to competitive patterns when immediate threats diminish. Alina watched humanity being assessed like a student whose homework revealed both intelligence and fundamental misunderstanding of the subject material. The aliens were evaluating not just what humans had achieved, but whether those achievements represented sustainable development or temporary success that would eventually collapse. The technological capabilities your species has developed exceed the social capabilities required to manage them responsibly, Thane continued. This represents a common failure pattern among civilizations at your development stage. Most species either achieve social development to match their technological capabilities, or experience civilizational collapse when their technology exceeds their wisdom. Alina realized she was learning about cosmic evolution patterns that determine which species survived to join galactic civilization. Humanity was being compared to thousands of civilizations that had faced similar developmental challenges, with outcomes that ranged from successful transcendence to complete extinction. What can Earth do to demonstrate the social development you're looking for? Alina asked. Unified response to the challenges revealed by this contact, Thane replied. Your species' reaction to confirmed alien presence will demonstrate whether humanity can transcend competitive patterns in favor of cooperative development. Alina understood that humanity's response to first contact would itself become part of the evaluation. If Earth's nations responded with competition for alien technology or attempts to gain advantage over other human populations, it would demonstrate exactly the kind of developmental failure that resulted in cosmic quarantine. Her communications array activated with transmissions from human leadership struggling to coordinate responses to unprecedented situation. Nightingale, this is Granite 6. Multiple world leaders are requesting direct contact with alien representatives. How do we manage competing national interests in first contact scenario? Alina looked at Coordinator Thane, understanding that the alien was monitoring her communications and evaluating humanity's response in real time. Granite 6. Recommend unified international response through existing diplomatic frameworks. Competing national approaches to alien contact will be interpreted as evidence of developmental inadequacy. Thane's response confirmed Alina's understanding. Representative Voss, your species' response to this contact will determine the timeline for re-evaluation. Competitive responses will extend quarantine periods significantly, while cooperative responses will advance qualification assessment. Alina realized that humanity was being tested in real time, with the evaluation continuing based on how Earth's leadership handled the unprecedented challenge of alien contact. Every decision made by human authorities was being monitored and assessed using criteria that most humans didn't know existed. Coordinator Thane, will you be remaining on Earth during this evaluation period? Alina asked. Diplomatic mission will establish observation station in orbital position, Thane replied. Direct surface contact will be limited to evaluation requirements and emergency intervention scenarios. Alina felt the weight of understanding that humanity was entering a period of cosmic probation, with alien observers monitoring human development, while Earth civilization attempted to evolve quickly enough to pass an examination, whose failure would result in indefinite isolation from the galactic community. She activated emergency protocols, transmitting to world leaders who needed to understand that humanity's future in space depended on their ability to cooperate rather than compete in response to the greatest challenge in human history. The final phase of initial contact proceeded with Coordinator Thane establishing communication protocols that would allow ongoing evaluation of humanity's development progress. Alina watched alien technology install monitoring systems that would track human social, technological, and environmental development with precision that exceeded anything Earth's science could achieve. Evaluation timeline will extend for your equivalent of 50 Earth years, Thane announced as the diplomatic mission prepared for departure to orbital observation station. Progress will be assessed at regular intervals, with qualification review occurring when development benchmarks are achieved. Alina understood that humanity had entered a 50-year probationary period, during which every aspect of human civilization would be monitored and evaluated by beings whose standards had been refined by observing thousands of civilizations, attempt the transition from planetary to cosmic existence. What happens if humanity passes the evaluation? Alina asked. Full membership in Galactic Diplomatic Corps, with access to interstellar transportation, advanced technology sharing, and participation in cosmic civilization governance, Thane replied. Your species would join approximately 4,000 civilizations that have successfully achieved cosmic membership. The promise was staggering: access to a galactic community that included thousands of civilizations with technology and knowledge that would transform human existence. But Alina also understood that membership required fundamental changes in human social organization that might be impossible to achieve within the evaluation timeframe. And if humanity fails? Continued isolation until qualification requirements are met or civilizational collapse occurs, Thane replied. Historical data suggests most species require multiple evaluation cycles to achieve membership qualifications. Alina activated her communications array for final transmission to human leadership. Granite 6, this is Nightingale, alien diplomatic mission departing for orbital observation station. Humanity has 50 years to demonstrate unified planetary governance, elimination of violent conflict, and sustainable resource management. Failure results in continued cosmic isolation. As the alien vessel prepared for departure, Alina realized that first contact had ended not with human expansion into space, but with humanity being placed under cosmic observation, while Earth's civilization attempted to evolve beyond its current limitations. Coordinator Thane approached Alina for final diplomatic contact. Representative Voss, your individual qualifications suggest your species has potential for successful development. The evaluation process will continue regardless of your participation, but your continued involvement would benefit both your species and our assessment accuracy. Alina understood that she was being invited to serve as Earth's primary liaison with galactic civilization during the evaluation period. The responsibility was overwhelming, but 20 years of impossible missions had prepared her for challenges that exceeded normal human capabilities. I accept the position, Coordinator Thane, Alina replied. What does that role require? Continued presence at this facility, with periodic reporting to galactic observation teams. You will serve as Earth's voice in ongoing evaluation and as communication channel between human leadership and cosmic authority. As the alien vessel departed for orbital position, Alina looked around at the hidden facility that had become humanity's first embassy to galactic civilization. The three special operations teams who had discovered evidence of alien presence were now witnesses to humanity's entry into cosmic probation. Alina activated long-range communications, transmitting to Jackson and Commander Kellerman, who were waiting at Coronado for news about the mission that had discovered first contact. Control, this is Silence. Mission successful. All personnel extracted safely. However, mission parameters have changed permanently. Humanity is now under cosmic evaluation for 50 years. As she spoke, Alina realized that Lieutenant Commander Alina Voss had died permanently in this valley, replaced by Earth's first cosmic diplomat. Silence had completed her final extraction mission by bringing not just the missing teams home, but by bringing humanity itself into contact with its cosmic future. The woman who had spent 20 years hiding from her past was now responsible for guiding her species through the most important 50 years in human history. 6 months after first contact, Alina stood in the transformed command center that had once been the hidden alien facility, now serving as Earth's primary communication hub with galactic civilization. The chamber hummed with technology that bridged the gap between human engineering and cosmic science, displaying real-time assessment data that tracked humanity's progress toward membership qualifications. Jackson arrived for his monthly visit wearing dress blues that carried new insignia recognizing his role as military liaison to the Cosmic Evaluation Project. The reunion between mother and son had become complicated by Alina's transformation from hidden civilian to Earth's primary representative with alien civilization, but their bond remained strong despite the unprecedented circumstances.